Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Strike! The 80-20 Coaching Masterclass. Our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome everyone, coaches, parents, players, welcome to this week's episode. I am pumped up for this week's episode. We have a fantastic interview with one of my former players, Chad Jacob. Since coaching Chad years ago, he has become an excellent hitting coach and he's having a lot of success in that role. So this is a 2-for-1. You hear from one of my old players, and more importantly, you're going to hear a lot of good information about hitting and how to coach up our hitters that are listening, for you to become better hitters. So Coach Jacob, Chad is now working with all levels of hitters. In fact, he discusses how he recently started working with a very talented 12-year-old, but Chad's worked with players all the way up to the major leagues, including Freddie Freeman. This is his day job. This is what he does full time. He coaches hitters. When he's not in the cages, Chad is on the phone with hitters across the country, talking hitting, helping them get better with their hitting game. In the episode, Chad will discuss the biggest mistake he sees hitters make and how it actually has nothing to do with their swing. Coach Jacob also shares his prioritization strategies when correcting swing flaws, including the first two things he's assessing in a hitter's swing. Chad then shares out his number one home training tip for those people that don't have a lot of equipment and an elaborate home setup, cages, pitching machine, etc. Chad also tells us what his number one recommended piece of hitting technology is and explains exactly why he thinks it's the best option for youth hitters. And Chad, aka Coach Jacob, also explains why it's so important for hitters to train and become competent at hitting the inside pitch, not only so they can successfully hit that pitch, but also because it makes them even better at hitting the outside pitch. So he's going to share out why he believes you should work from the inside out as a hitter or as a hitting coach. We talk about a few other awesome things. With that said, this is it for the intro. We're going to dive into this interview, and I will be sure to link all of Chad's information in the show summary, or you can just email me and I'll send it to you. All right, let's dive into the interview. All right, listeners, I am pumped up to be here today with one of my former players, but now he's a coach, Coach Chad Jacob. Chad, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I'm pumped up. I'm so glad to have you on here. I get excited for these discussions, these interviews, but I'll tell you what, this one got me a little more excited than most. With that said, I know your backstory, but I'd love for you to share with the listeners your backstory and what's led you to where you're at now and what you're doing now.
Yeah, played baseball my whole life, completely fell in love with the game. Little backstory on me and Coach Bo. He coached me throughout high school. It was amazing. It was an amazing time. And I don't just say that because I'm on his podcast right now, but truly the insight that he had on how he coached the game, not just with me, but just with my teammates. It was awesome. So I played for him in high school. And then I was fortunate enough to get a Division I scholarship. I went to Valparaiso University in Northwest Indiana. From there, I was even, blessed and fortunate enough to be actually a 4-year starter there. It was a great experience. It's really funny turning on the TV and seeing guys that, are in the big leagues that, I definitely played against, struck out against. Nonetheless, it was great. Throughout my college career, of course, if you attend a 4-year, you got to wait until you're a junior to be drafted. It was actually looking like my junior year, I was going to get drafted, and then I got a really bad concussion. It was one of those concussions that I didn't know if I was actually going to continue to play. I didn't know how serious it was at the very beginning, but it kept me out for the rest of the year. And then because of that, I didn't play summer ball, didn't get drafted. But throughout that process, I was able to meet a guy who I hit with, interned with, and then have worked with the last 8 years, very recently just leaving. His name is Ryan Chapman. He owns Chapman Baseball Compound. He just taught me so much about how to train and how to develop, and then also just a much healthier mindset of how to think about things. And what he showed me was a genuine care that he had for players. Like I said, I worked with him. I was the director of hitting at Chapman Baseball Compound. I was actually director of business operations there as well. Now where I'm at, I actually left about a month ago, and I'm actually transitioning to starting my own thing. No hard feelings there at all. just growing in different directions. And, we still stay in touch. But yeah, now I'm starting my own thing. Where I'm at is I specialize in hitting development and player development, analytics, high speed video. I try to use as much information as possible, but I try to, you got to meet people where they're at. Some people love it. Some people don't love it. Some people don't love it because the way that it's portrayed or been conveyed to them in the past has not been what they've needed, or it's been shoved down their throat. This journey has been a fun game of really getting to know people on a more personal level, to not just know what makes them tick, but how are you going to get the most out of them? And it's been a lot of fun to go through that journey.
I'll tell you what, your players are lucky to have you. You were always 100% go hustle kind of player, hardworking, great kid, one of the best teammates of the kids I've coached, just one of the best teammates that I ever saw as a coach. And you always thought of the game you were athletic. You 4-year starter at a Division I school,
Yeah.
Valpo. But on top of that, you were also an all-star teammate and person. The sky's the limit for you. So that's really cool to hear what's going on with you, and wish you the best with all that. I know we'll be staying in touch, but first let's talk some hitting here.
Let's do it.
Got some questions here for you. So what are some of the more common swing mistakes in young hitters?
Great question. It's really interesting. I think, honestly, I would have answered this a little bit different, maybe even a year ago. And then 3 years ago and 5 years ago. I'm probably going to answer some of these questions a little unexpected, but the most common swing mistakes I see in young hitters now is not necessarily maybe something as much mechanical as much as it is the fact that they think that they have a problem. How I kind of break it down with hitters, especially young guys, is I've been fortunate enough to work with youth athletes all the way up to big leaguers. A couple MLB All-Stars. Freddie Freeman was one of my guys that I blessed to work with, and a handful of other guys just like that. And the more that I talk to these guys and the more that I am actually able to look at a lot of video, you actually see so many ways that these guys that we all love, there's so many different ways to swing a baseball bat. And it's just opened my eyes to, instead of youth hitters thinking that they need to look a certain way or they have a common issue, I think maybe the common denominator there is, of course, like a strength and speed aspect, of course, that they need to get better at. But I think the mistake isn't necessarily mechanically. It's that they think that they have a mistake and they're not, quote unquote, chasing what they should be chasing after. Getting guys to realize that and understand that. We have an onboarding process, an evaluation process, getting young hitters to, of course, like, we can fix mechanics. We will fix your mechanics. Those need to get better. But it's more so the way that they think up here is probably the most common, quote unquote, mistake that I see. And that technically they could be game ready and they can definitely get battle tested right now, and they can compete and they can definitely win with what they got. But I see hitters not asking themselves the right questions after at bats. Was I on time? Was I not on time? Was I swinging at good pitches to hit? And was I finding barrel? So walking hitters through more of the way that big leaguers would walk themselves through at bats. If we can teach that at a much younger age, in my opinion, it's not a matter of if we taught that, would they get better? It's to what extent would they be better? So that's kind of what I'm saying.
And with that, I would think you have a little bit more of a simplified version for younger kids, and it progressively gets more advanced.
Totally. What I do with my younger kids, and I do it with some of my older guys as well, of course, but they naturally maybe have more questions. I'm working currently right now, as we speak, I'm working with a stud, just turned 12-year-old. And what I'm kind of trying to, and I'm trying my best, what I'm trying to instill in that just turned 12-year-old, every time that he sees me, he's got homework. So the first part of homework is I ask him all the drills that I give him, all the stuff that we went over, was he implementing that during the week and how it went? He's got to tell me that. And then the other question is, he needs to think about a question that he has for me for the next time that he sees me. And it's open dialogue. So when he comes to see me, he asks a question. And I think it's really great to kind of get these younger kids, no matter where they're at, to start to think about the game a little bit more, instead of just, hey, I have to do this because I saw this person do it. That's definitely great, but I think getting kids to answer questions, get to think a little bit more, has been great.
Interesting answer. What's the most common swing mistake? And you're saying it's not the hands, it's not the arms, not even the feet. It's between the ears.
Really. The context behind that, it's like you have Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto, and like a Mookie Betts, two righties, two lefties, different body types, different sizes. All those guys, their hands are in different spots. All those guys, not only are they different from each other, but Shohei Ohtani won't hit two homers back to back that look similar if you actually look at it. When you start to think about it like that, like you work so hard to perfect your mechanics. And that's great. There's a time and place for it. Do not get me wrong. But I think when guys have a better understanding that it's okay to not be perfect mechanically as long as you are doing the things that scale as to why these guys are so good in the first place, they can find barrel when they're even off time. If we can get guys more comfortable in different spots, let's practice being good at one spot and another spot and another spot. That's, no pun intended, what the game is going to throw at you. So it's where I'm at.
It sounds like you have some absolutes, some first principles, and then you're malleable with each player to fit what's best for them. And then obviously come game time, you're going to face different pitchers, different speeds, different locations, different batters box, different umpires.
Totally.
So you got to be able to adjust.
Yeah, going into game time, you might have slept not as great or maybe even better than, it's just there's so many different variables, which could, of course, be a little bit more of a metaphor for life. If we can just get more comfortable of things that happen outside of our control. I mean, trust me, I'm trying to get better at it, being out of the game, now coaching, but in all aspects of life. If we can instill that at a young age, you'll have kids that, go into a tournament or go into a weekend, go into a game and hit 3 lineouts. And I know this sounds cliche what I'm about to say, and they might, be pounding their way back to the dugout. It's like, if you did that the rest of your life, what are the odds that you only find a glove the rest of your life? That is what guys that make literally hundreds of millions of dollars are only trying to do. And so I think if you can reverse that or change some of that way of thinking with some of these younger guys, it takes a little bit of pressure off of them when inevitably, as they get higher and higher and higher in level, of course, they're going to feel more of that pressure, mostly because, of course, the game is going to get harder. But if we can be a little bit more process oriented and quote unquote chase after what is most important, maybe that might make it a little bit easier on us as hitters to have success.
Speaking of success as a hitter, now we talked some mental aspects there. Let's look at the mechanics of the swing. Every player, of course, every hitter is going to have some different nuances. There's probably no exact alike within a millimeter or centimeter of every body part moving the same in the whole world. With that said, when you look at a hitter and you get to their mechanics, their swing mechanics, what are you prioritizing? Or do you have a priority order that you look at things? Let's say you see 3 different things or 2 different things. Do you try to work on one before the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the backing that I have on the swing is I read all these different books, and there's technically a science to hitting biomechanics. And so when I'm breaking down a hitter and I'm looking at video, specifically probably side video, that's one of the best angles. If you want to break down the swing itself, side video I think is best. The first thing that I'm looking for is lower half, and I'm actually looking to see how well they get off their backside. You're going to see a guy like Aaron Judge, who hangs back there a little bit more. And you're going to see a guy like Pete Crow Armstrong, or Corbin Carroll, who stride the length of the batter's box. But what's really interesting is a guy like Aaron Judge and the way that he loads, and a guy like PCA or, Altuve, whatever, is they're always going to get forward movement. That is probably number 1 on the priority list, largely because you can't initiate the upper half without initiating the lower half. So we can assume that the lower half is extremely important. What you're going to see in both of those guys is they actually gain ground towards the pitcher. Believe it or not, as big as a guy like Aaron Judge is, he's getting off of his backside. As small of a guy as, Mookie is or Altuve is, they're getting off their backside. A toe tap guy like Shohei Ohtani, even though he technically never gets his foot off the ground, you look at video, he's moving off of his backside. That is kind of like the number 1 checklist. Number 1 on the checklist of things that I'm looking for is, very simply put, forward movement. I think it comes down to the individual of what is enough and what is too much. I think especially at a young age, being able to push your boundary on how much is too much, really trying to find that line, I think is fantastic. So that would be probably number 1 on the priority list. And then the next maybe big thing that I'm probably looking for, again, I probably would have answered this part a little bit differently in the past, but I think mechanically, I'm looking for how long can guys keep their barrel in the length of the strike zone. And of course, I could have said something about your chest or your shoulder or your arm. And while those are all good things to look at, the only reason why you want those things to be good is so that your barrel can just be in the zone for a very, very long time. I used to think that barrel depth meant how deep can you get your barrel started in the zone, but barrel depth and what these guys do who make lots of money playing this game is their barrel doesn't only start deep in the zone, but they stay in the zone for so long. And so that would probably be the next thing that I look for is consistently how well can guys keep their barrel going through the zone, through the baseball, through the pitcher's head, and through the batter's eye. That's kind of how I cue that.
What is something that hitters can do, generally speaking, of course? What's something you would do with a hitter to help them keep that barrel in the zone longer? This is fascinating. You hear a lot of the hitting coaches and major league hitters talk about, I keep it through the zone, and they kind of show this out in front movement, like out in front of the plate. They kind of hold it. So if they get fooled or whatever, they can still, but you're right. It's a combination of why give up the backside of the hitting zone just for why can't you have both? And a lot of hitters are, like you said, a lot of young hitters are in and out of the hitting zone so fast that their window of contact is so small.
Yes,
so
yeah.
what are maybe like a 12-year-old, if you're working with a 12-year-old who's like just in and out of the hitting zone, what are some things that might help them?
So great question. I think what I really love to do, I try and get, and of course it's dependent on player, but this is generally where I love to go. I'll get hitters to do like a top hand drill. Like they're spread out and their bottom hand is on their chest for a little bit more control. I'll get them in their stance and then I'll kick the tee out obnoxiously far. More than half the time they look at me like I'm crazy. And I'll just tell them, like, if you can stay through the middle, great, but hit it. And there's kind of that uncomfortability factor that starts to come into play where they look at me like, it looks like you're asking me to do something I physically can't do. And it's just like, okay, well, we don't know if you physically can or can't do it if you don't try to do it. So removing that boundary of like, and getting them more comfortable with what they're uncomfortable with, like I said, is a huge theme. But in that drill, in that one-handed drill, whether they're choking up on their bat or they've got like a one-handed bat, both work. Forcing their arm to go meet that baseball and go stay through it over time really helps kind of groove that pattern. And then like the progression of that is, of course, when they have two hands in their normal bat, there's like a 3/4 finish and like really try and quote unquote stick it through the batter's eye. And then cueing guys, whether it's moving baseball stuff, whether it's a flip or a dart or like an overhand or like a machine, if we are specifically working on bat path, we're not going to really care about the result as much as we are going to care about how much we think we're catching baseballs out in front and how much it feels different in the short term. That would be kind of like the drill perspective of things and into the progression of how that would look as the session went on.
Love that idea. So listeners, you hear that? That's a great idea, putting the tee out. My general thought on tees is overall, I think more coaches overvalue a tee than I think they should, but they underutilize. I think the tee is very underutilized in certain methods, in certain ways, in certain manners. I think if you utilize the tee right, it can be very effective. Overall, I think kids need to see pitches and they need to get timing. There's no timing on a tee. So that inherently, fundamentally, and also it's not just timing, but the pitch location.
Yep.
So it kind of makes me think, Chad, of my daughter. When you got a young kid, when my daughter was a little younger, I moved the ottoman out. I moved the ottoman out from the couch, and she was jumping from the couch to the ottoman, and I moved it out, and she looked at me like you're crazy, Dad. I can't jump that far. So when you put the tee out, I can see that like you put the tee out that far. And I'll tell you what, I'm such a huge fan of moving the tee out, like out far. I just picked something up from you right now. Putting the tee maybe also deep in the zone, to not too deep because you don't want to create bad habits and have this kind of loopy swing, right?
Yeah.
But how far back in the hitting zone should their barrel be on plane and coming through the ball? Then put the tee there, challenge them to get behind the ball as soon as possible, and then work that. I love it. I love it. It's good stuff.
Totally. Yeah, no, it could be, and again, it's different for everybody. You could work that progression. You can go deep to kind of deep to not as deep to normal to a little out in front to a lot out in front, and you know what? You're going to find guys that love to do that. You're going to find guys that only want to do the deep. You're going to find the guys that only want to be the out in front, which is fine, especially if that's how they warm up. At the end of the day, all of it, in my opinion, has to help them for the game. What I work on Even with all of my younger guys, all the way up to I'm on coaching calls with just before this, I have a kid that just got drafted this past year who's going to go play he's playing in the big league games, talking to D1, fortunate enough to talk to D1 players across the country, had a call with this guy yesterday. And it's all about with these guys, all of these big guys all the way down to the youth level. At the end of the day, it's all about what is going to help that individual person be better for the game and be more confident for the game. We play in a game that is very results oriented, statistics and stuff like that, and hitting and having a high batting average is hard. But getting these guys to feel more comfortable and confident for the game, we can logically assume that if these guys are truly coming into the game feeling better than they have, we can only assume that they're at least over time, going to have more and more success.
We just talked about a little bit of some tee work that you do. What's some advice you would have for a parent at home? They're with their kid and they're working at home with their kid on their hitting technique. So we have the home environment. Let's assume they don't have a batting cage. Maybe they have a screen, just some basic hitting stuff. What's maybe something that parents could do or a kid could do to help improve their batting technique at home when they don't have a pitcher or pitching machine and all that stuff?
Good question. If you've got like really basic equipment, like a tee, or you don't have as much equipment or space, but you can even flip. I'll start with the tee. My advice would be off the tee, move the tee around as much as possible. Of course, there's a cliche and for good reason, hey, you need to be able to hit this tee down the middle 100 times into the back net or into whatever you're hitting into. And there's validity to that. I think that you need to be really good at hitting pitches down the middle, right? However, as much as we need to be good at hitting pitches down the middle, we need to be good at hitting pitches in. And I specifically say in before I say away, because in my opinion, just doing this for longer and talking to more people, hitters are naturally going to get a much better move off. They're not going to be jamming themselves a whole lot. They're not going to be pulling across their body a whole lot. If they know how to hit a pitch that is coming in faster than that away pitch. What I'm talking about is obviously anything in, your reaction time has to be quicker to that in pitch than that away pitch. I'm under the understanding right now, and this is what I'm actually working on with youth hitters right now, especially in the day and age where even these youth kids are throwing harder and people are throwing harder. If we can teach guys to efficiently get to that in pitch, then the away is going to be easier, when maybe in the past it was get to that out pitch and then you can get to that in pitch. Getting guys to have a much better understanding of how to hit the inside pitch, in my opinion, really sets up guys better to be able to handle out over better. All that to say, hit the middle pitch, hit the in pitch, hit the away pitch, hit the up pitch, hit the low pitch, hit the pitch that's, maybe even a little off the plate. Just play around with it. Again, I think that hitting that pitch down the middle is so important. But as much as that is important, let's hit other things. And then, progressing that, if, even if it's like an underhand toss of some sort, get to the point where you're really challenging these kids to not so much think about what they have to do mechanically to get to the baseball. There's a time and place for that. But hey, we're going to go this round, or we're going to go these next couple rounds. Like, we're going to have fun with it. I'm going to throw this anywhere. Success is, can you find a barrel to it? That would be the advice that I have for being able to do things at home. Again, that's some of the homework that I give some of my youth guys right now. Go off a tee, hit different locations, and have fun doing it, and kind of progress that.
Yeah, the tee is something that's super cheap. And of course, you don't need a pitcher and you don't need a lot of space for that. And you could even throw up a tarp or a net or one of those screens. It could be a very cheap setup and be very effective. When you mentioned be able to hit the inside, if you work on hitting the inside pitch, and if you can put the tee in a tough to hit inside spot and you can feel comfortable getting to that, it opens up, it helps you hit the outside pitch. And so I know that sounds counterintuitive to many probably listening, but it makes me think of this coach, John Donaher. And now John Donaher's probably never picked up a baseball in his life, probably never been on a baseball field, but he's, to me, one of the greatest coaches of our generation. And most people have never heard of John Donaher.
He's considered the greatest martial arts coach, or at least one of the top martial arts coaches. He has his athletes start in tough positions. He does it different. He teaches all of his guys, and why his guys have all become some of the best is, one, he does the leg lock, the foot lock, which is something that was foreign to, or new to a lot. But anyways, the big part of it was he trains them in the hardest to get out of positions to start with. That's the initial training. And somebody's like, well, why are you training your guys to get out of these crazy, you're literally just a hair away from submission in all these different locks and submissions. Why are you training them to get out of there? Why don't you train them to prevent that? Why don't you train the offense? He said, you know why? Because if they can go out there confident, knowing they can get out of the toughest positions, like you said, if a hitter can go up there knowing they can hit those, what they consider to be tough pitches, those really tough locations, that frees them up to be able to hit all the other pitches confidently because they're not overcompensating. They're freer, they're looser. He said, my players are more confident. They play freer, knowing that they can get out of that tough situation if they get in it. It's like a hitter going up there. I have such trouble with the inside pitch. They're so focused on it because they haven't trained it or got comfortable with it. Then all of a sudden they got no chance on the outside pitch.
Yep. Totally.
Right.
And I love that you said that, and thinking about it, that is extremely similar to kind of how I'm talking about it. I got to check that guy out. Now I'm very curious. If you think about it mechanically, if we're trying to hit the away pitch, and don't get me wrong, you have to hit the away pitch and you have to be able to drive that pitch the other way. Mechanically speaking, hitting that away pitch, our body has to look good to that pitch. And what I mean by that is, like, because naturally the away pitch is further away from our body, we're not going to be tied up to go get to that pitch. We are going to rotate a little bit cleaner because it's away from us, because we have a little bit more time to react to that. We're going to clean up, like our arms are going to be straighter, our path is maybe going to be a little bit cleaner. But then when we get to that in pitch, ideally we want to put that same swing on the baseball. But again, there's like this timing element to everything, that if we're off time, what inevitably has to happen for us to still get our barrel to it is our body's got to compensate. If we're off time to that in pitch, then our body starts to cut across. And if our body starts to cut across, we only want to control our body because we want to control our bat, because our bat is the one that's hitting the baseball. So we can only assume that if our body cuts across, then what is our barrel going to be doing? Cutting across. Over time, if your body is cutting across because it is trying to compensate for what it knows that it can't touch in that in pitch, then realistically, how good are we going to not only just be on that in pitch, but middle and out? Because naturally everything's cutting across our body. It vastly decreases our margin for error. So that's why I kind of say in to out kind of opens up everything as opposed to out to in, because naturally, like an example that I give, it's like when I'm talking to even young hitters about this, I'll stand a couple feet back from them. I'll say, walk towards me. And then what does everybody do? Of course, they just walk right at me. And I'm like, okay, like, why did you not walk like around me to get to me? It's like, okay, well, like that's not as efficient. That's not intuitive. That's a lot slower. It's kind of like hitting the away pitch. You're not going to get like, and I hold out my hand to the away pitch for them. It's like, you're not going to move to that away pitch in a way that's not conducive to getting to that pitch. You're just going to go get it. And so instead of prioritizing, okay, I have to go get that first, naturally, in my opinion, your body's going to be really good at seeing a baseball and naturally knowing what it needs to do to go get it. If the in pitch is going to give us the toughest time, especially in today's game as we get older and older because it's harder, let's learn how to hit that so that we're not cutting across the zone nearly as much as maybe we would by doing some things in a reverse order, so to speak.
I know some coaches might be thinking, well, hey, Coach Jacob, Coach Shad, Coach Bo, 90% of pitches are away. Yes, the catcher sets up away. But if you tracked where those pitches end up, pitchers, even in the big leagues, literally hit their spot like 1 out of 5 if they're really good. Like the glove moves, like I think they measured this. The average major league catcher's glove on an average pitch moves like 12 inches from where it's set up. So if major leaguers are missing their target, which you would think the glove is pretty much where the catcher wants it, unless he's trying to trick everybody, which doesn't make a lot of sense. In certain situations, maybe. So I think that just because their catcher is setting up outside, we have to really look at it from an honest perspective and realistic and say, yeah, but a lot of the pitches come inside and are still called strikes. I know your time is tight. You got another call after this. You're talking hitting all day long. Technology for kids. What are some things that are good in terms of technology for like a 12-year-old, that 12-year-old level-ish? What are some things you'd recommend leaning into with technology and maybe some things to be a little more cautious and hesitant with?
Great question. I think the number one thing that I would say, if you can have a piece of technology, this is what it would be. I would say go grab a blast motion. Blast motion is a bat sensor that you can put at the end of your bat. It'll track your hand speed, your bat speed, and it will track at various different angles, how much your bat is swinging up through the zone, attack angle. It'll track your vertical bat angle, your angle of your bat at contact, and then like a whole list of things. Obviously, when you get it, blast motion really educates you on what these things are. I would say that would probably be the most important piece of tech that you can have. Knowing how wide your hands are, or how fast your hands are, and how fast your bat is extremely important. But also these, like some of these bigger angles that is becoming more public knowledge and public information of the angles that big leaguers are taking to the baseball. And then you have access to it. It can really put you in a threshold, or, you can really start to compare yourselves against what some of the greats are doing. So I would say if you could get one piece of technology, it would be a blast motion. I think all the other pieces of technology are great. Some of them, of course, being more expensive. I have a lot of familiarity with what's called HitTrax. HitTrax is a ball flight monitor. It spits out exit velo, launch angle, distance, and all that good stuff. It does so much more than just that. I think that maybe why I'm not as inclined to say that, hey, you need to get, or what is important is something like a ball flight monitor as much as it is like a bat sensor, is because like you're going to see guys at the highest level. And I always will revert so much of the advice that I give to what the highest level is doing, because we can think of the highest level as like the test that everyone's taking in the world, but these guys are getting the best grades on consistently. So we can only imagine that, cycling down, there's some sort of scale, of course. You see a guy like Luis Arias, Nolan Shanwell, I'm missing so many names that are on the bottom of the list that don't hit the ball nearly as hard as Ohtani and Judge and Acuna and all those guys, but they play the same game. They have so much success doing it. At the end of the day, like getting your barrel to something is the most important thing consistently, whether you hit it 100 or 120. It's the fact that these guys do it the most consistently that keeps them in the league. And again, we can only assume that like when you're in the minor leagues and then college and then high school and then pre-high school and then in youth baseball, like probably the more guys that are going to find barrel consistently, no matter how hard they hit it, it's probably going to scale. And then I think in the long run, you're not even going to need to worry, like naturally with how much older you're getting, puberty, lifting weights, really coming into your body. You're not going to necessarily need to worry as much how hard you're hitting something, as long as you're getting it on the barrel, because that's just going to take care of itself. But having that blast motion, knowing where certain speeds are at, is really good to kind of compare yourself against where some of these guys, are at. Maybe taking it a little bit simpler. Your camera, video, looking at that stuff, I think is great, but that's kind of where I'm at with technology.
I'll tell you what, listeners, Chad is somebody who's really good with the tech, and I've been following him a long time. I mean, obviously I coached him, but I followed him in his coaching career, and he's very tech savvy. And I would say that's something that he really has a great understanding of relative to your typical hitting coach out there. So I would listen to that, what he just said, and definitely consider what he just said. I think that sounds fantastic. Here's 2 stats to keep in mind. What percentage of pitches did your hitter swing at that they should have swung at? Kind of different with 2 strikes and less than 2 strikes, but did they swing at their pitches with less than 2 strikes? And did they basically swing at pitches in or near the strike zone with 2 strikes? What was their score? What was their percentage? And then 2, what percentage of the times they swung, all swings, even swings and misses, did they hit a line drive that went between the lines? And I would go hard one hopper through the infield, through a high line drive.
Totally. And real quick, not to cut you off, I think in my opinion, honestly, coach, it's like that kind of thinking that gets me fired up. Like it's the process, and it's just a great way. And I know you're kind of just thinking out loud right now. I think that's just like a great way to kind of scale who your best hitters are. I know I've said it before, but that's the way that you like to think, and you get to thinking. It fires me up. So I love it.
Well, I'll tell you what, that pumps me up to hear that you're pumped up. It takes away, it's like quality at bats is good, and quality at bats is better than just statistics, like say batting average and that, because we all know that a line drive that gets caught by the shortstop, you're a great shortstop, gets caught by you on a dive, the hitter did his job. We all know that was a great at bat. But I think it should be on the pitch level. We're assessing the process. I would go down to the more granular pitch by pitch. Now, we talked about line drives. The last question that we're going to have time for today. Yeah. What are some things that you've seen or had success with when working with hitters, and specifically maybe young hitters, to overcome or work through a slump faster?
That's an incredible question. And you know what? I think I'd probably make more money doing what I do for a living if I had a better answer. Not that I don't have a good answer. And of course, that's like the $1 million question. What do you do when hitters slumping? Based off of my experience in coaching and working with guys that are at the highest of highs and working with guys that are on the lowest of lows, what I'm learning is when guys are slumping and guys are slumping to the magnitude where like it is not great. I'll just say that it's just not really that good. What I'll do is I'll talk to them, of course. And, hey, what do you got? What's going on? So often when guys are consistently slumping, they'll tell me what they're trying to do. And this goes for big leaguers all the way down to youth guys that I've worked with. And so often, I'm not saying it's all the time, but way more often than not, it is typically when they tell me that this is what they're trying to do to get back to something, I'll say, great, let's do the opposite of that. What we don't do as human beings, in my opinion, and as hitters, is we don't give ourselves enough credit for how well we are actually doing the things that we are telling ourselves to do. And I know that sounds a little wild, and I'll break that down a little bit more. It's like, okay, when I had success, I was really trying to stay on my backside. I'm just giving an example. And I'm not having any success right now. I'm only trying to stay on my backside, and I'm just trying to get better and better at it. But what I typically see is guys chase what they think that they need to do, and they're actually doing what they want to do. But they're trying to do so much of it. They're on this spectrum of like, because they're actually doing what they really want to do, it's taking them away from what they need to do. Typically, when guys slump, I really like to get, obviously, within the years of what they're thinking about. So often I get to the root of what they're trying to do. And I tell them, hey, let's consider doing it the opposite way. Of course, they look at me, it's uncontrollable, it's uncomfortable. More often than not, that actually helps them kick it into gear a little bit more here, allows them to perceive what's going on a little bit differently, and allows them to make that adjustment a little bit easier. Typically, that's what really helps guys the most, is getting them to feel comfortable doing the opposite of what they're trying to do, because we can only assume that these guys are actually, at a young age and at a higher age, these guys are athletic enough, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for how well we do the things that we ask ourselves to do. And so typically that's what happens in a slump, is we're actually doing too well what we're telling ourselves to do, and we need to get comfortable feeling out the opposite.
Trying to do too much and just trust the process.
Totally.
I love it. Hey, Coach, appreciate you, Chad, coming on here. Thank you so much. I'd love to have you come back on.
Yes, I would love
in the fall.
To be back on. Yep.
I appreciate it. I know you got a hitting call to get to right now. Thank you so much for coming on. This is great.
Totally. Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll definitely be in touch. Thanks for having me. Take care, Coach.
All right, that wraps up the interview. Had a lot of fun talking with Chad, Coach Jacob. He's really making a name for himself in the hitting world. The sky's the limit for him. He's open-minded. He's intelligent. He was a heck of a player. Great person. I hope you got a lot out of that. I know I did. You can follow him on Instagram and his other channels. I'll put that stuff in the show notes. If you're in the Southern California area, you can go see him. Real quick before we check out, don't forget the coaching plan, your one-stop shop for the things you need to confidently walk out there and be a great coach. My top 15 drills, throwing routine, warm-up routine, scrimmage guide, and a lot more. All that can be found in the 80-20 baseball coaching plan. You can have access in minutes. You can be using this stuff later today if you want. I break down all the drills on my 75-inch touchscreen. You don't need to download anything. It's all hubbed in one spot, easy to access. You just bookmark it and hop in. It's got ready-made practice plans. And right now, only twice a year this happens, a 10% off discount. Use the promo Great Coaching, all one word, Great Coaching. That ends in 1 week. It's only good through March. It's built so even if you use just half of it, you're still going to get twice your money's worth. In my opinion, it's easily the best priced, most robust youth baseball coaching plan, coaching system out there. You can have access in minutes. It took years to build. It wasn't something I just slapped together to sell. I put it together to make a big impact. So you can get that right now at 8020baseball.com. All right, it's going to wrap it up. Hope you all have a great rest of your week. Let's keep taking care of our health, our foundations, so we can be at our best for our families, our close friends, our players. Let's take the information that we listened to and heard today. Let's take it out. Let's put it into play. Let's go hit line drives with it. Y'all take care. Until next week, adios.
has been the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.